Chapter 1. Sorry to be a bother, but can you remind me which colours Lady Roberts requested for the Empire morning gowns? Lizzie asked as she held up a bolt of fabric against her tall, skinny frame. Olivia looked up from her ledger at the older woman. The baby pink and the cerulean blue, both in the same design, she explained, and 2 chemisettes in ivory. Ah, yes, Lizzie mumbled. I remember now. Lizzie disappeared back through the door, entering the front room of the modiste shop to begin cutting the fabric, while keeping an eye out for customers. Olivia chuckled as she watched her leave. Lizzie, her assistant seamstress, had simply the worst memory. Lady Roberts had left the shop not more than 10 minutes ago, and already she had forgotten. Still, she was a wonderful seamstress and an excellent assistant for her. Olivia Dickens, daughter of the Earl of Essex, sat back in her chair with her quill tickling her lips as she smiled. At 28 years old, life had not quite turned out as she had expected, but she enjoyed her work as a modiste. She was a short woman, and though slim, she could never be accused of being skinny. Her skin was as pale as snow, though her cheeks flushed bright and often, and her deep brown eyes sparkled often. Her hair was always pinned back and out of the way, but when allowed, it would cascade around her face in a mass of golden curls. She was sensitive and kind, a woman brought up surrounded by love. Olivia devoted her life to her family in return. Music and art were her first loves, though she adored watching children at play whenever she visited the park. The notion of marriage and having children of her own had crossed her mind often, though, for most of the time, she tucked that very notion away, for she knew that couldn't be for her. I couldn't possibly ever find the time. Sorry, me again, Lizzie called out, popping her head around the doorframe. Your friend's here, the one with all the children. Sarah! Oh, goody! Olivia leapt up from her seat, excited by the visit. Lizzie, now getting on in years and not afraid to say what she thought, didn't approve of Sarah bringing all those children into the shop. It meant sticky fingers touching delicate fabrics and prying eyes leafing through pattern books. Olivia, though, loved it. Mind you, Lizzie did not mind young William, Olivia's young brother, hanging around. He might only have 10 years behind him, but he was well behaved. It was true the children were a touch manic and perhaps not under as much control as they should be, but Olivia adored the life and energy they brought to the shop. She and Sarah had not been friends long, a few months at most, but in that time they'd become as close as sisters. Olivia dashed into the front of the shop. She passed by the low podium in the middle of the room, where they kept bolts of fabric in every colour imaginable running down one wall. Against the other wall, a fireplace always roared, even in the middle of summer, and on it a kettle boiled away with water, forever readying the tea for guests. What a lovely surprise, Olivia crooned as she floated into the room. The youngest of the 3 children was propped up on the couch next to the fire. The older 2 wandered around, fingers into everything. An observant Lizzie followed them around, shooing them away from everything they dared to touch. I was just popping to the market for some groceries and thought we'd call in, Sarah announced, brushing her hair from her face and sighing as she sat down, rubbing at her tummy bump. Olivia joined her on the couch, little Lucy balancing between them, and reached over to squeeze her friend's hand. Sarah looked tired and full of woes, which Olivia wished she could eradicate. Her poor friend struggled with so many children, that much was certain. Well, Jenny, Amy, Sarah called, rounding up her wandering flock. Aren't you going to give your Aunt Olivia a hug? The children giggled and ran over to their new aunt, throwing themselves into her open arms in the most affectionate and improper way. Olivia laughed, burying her nose in silky locks of hair and inhaling their fresh scents. Rowdy they may have been, but they were the most adorable little beings. "Where's William?" they asked in unison, for they loved to play with him. "Running errands, I'm afraid. Now off you go," she declared, patting their backs. "Mind that you behave yourselves, and listen to Aunt Lizzie when she tells you not to touch things." Lizzie had her back to them, sorting through fabrics. She snorted in derision. "Chance would be a fine thing," she remarked. "They never listen to a word I say." Now, Lizzie, they're only children," Olivia reminded her assistant. "Animals, more like." Sarah mumbled sardonically. Lizzie turned to face the girls at play. Her lips pursed as she thought. "It's a terrible shame you never married and had children of your own, Miss Olivia," she said. "You would have made a wonderful mother." "She's not dead yet," Sarah retorted, glaring at Lizzie, though the seamstress seemed not to notice. Olivia bit her lip, the physical pain masking the stirring emotions she felt. Of course, Lizzie was right. Terrible shame. Lizzie repeated, shaking her head sadly. "If only you were a few years younger, I would know just the man for you. The nephew of my friend, Mary. He's a handsome one, he is, and has a good business head on him too, as well as being a decent Christian man, but what with you being past your prime and all, I simply can't spare the time for dilly-dallying with courting and marriage," Olivia said, interrupting Lizzie's unintentionally hurtful words. "As well you know, I have enough on with caring for my poor parents, after all that happened. That's not even accounting my little brother William. He needs my attentions too. Whilst I'm not past my prime yet, perhaps one day I will have time to think about marriage. So, please, Lizzie, my dear, let's not discuss the matter again." "You know perfectly well that Olivia has been a faithful daughter, Lizzie," Sarah intervened, her tiredness adding to her biting words. "She has been looking after her parents ever since the fire. It's the only income the family have now. And then William popped along, rather unexpectedly. It can't be easy with such a large year gap between you and your brother, Olivia." Olivia sat back on the couch and sighed, letting Lizzie and Sarah battle it out between them. She hated any mention of the fire that had, many years ago, destroyed their manor house, and along with it, her family's entire wealth. All but the modiste shop was gone, a shop her father had once silently invested in for her mother's entertainment, but it was now an integral part of their lives. The family resided in the apartment above, living off the money Olivia made in the making of gowns for the rich and the powerful. Her father, an earl, had sunk into deep distemper, though he did his best to be jolly, whilst her mother did all she could to cook and clean and keep house, even after a lifetime of being waited upon by servants of her own, though, thankfully, the shop did well enough, especially with older ladies wishing to teach their young daughters how to behave. Despite the misfortunes that had befallen them, Olivia and William were still of noble birth, and raised as such. Even now she upheld the mannerisms and proprieties of a lady, and she taught William likewise. "A good man is sure to come along for Olivia," Sarah's voice echoed in the air. "Regardless of her age, she will make an excellent wife for any suitor." "Can we stop now, please?" Olivia snapped with discomfort. While Sarah meant to be kind, her words stabbed at Olivia's heart. She wished she could be as certain as Sarah was, that one day she might marry. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Olivia. I never—" Sarah's apology was interrupted by the bell above the door. A maidservant came rushing in, pulling at the dark cloak around her neck. "Can I help you?" Lizzie asked, looking the girl up and down. She couldn't have been more than 15 years old, and already she looked tired of life. "Please," Olivia said, standing up. "Won't you take a seat? Perhaps join us for a cup of tea?" Lizzie shot her mistress a horrified look, but Olivia paid her no attention. She could not send the flustered young girl back onto the streets without at least a little sweet tea inside her. "I can't stop," the girl spoke. "I'm here to make an appointment for my lady." "Of course." Olivia nodded as she crossed her hands demurely to her front. Once again, she attempted to offer the girl a seat while she fetched the diary. "This is my cue to leave," Sarah said, getting up from the couch and picking up the seated youngster in a single, fluid movement. "Amy, come along. Jenny, get your face out of that fabric." Olivia turned to watch with the diary clutched to her chest as her friend left the shop. Sympathy pinched at her heart. Motherhood did not suit Sarah, as sure as she was certain it would suit her. Olivia knew her friend struggled to find the energy to guide her flock along. "Now then," she said brightly, turning to the girl who had, despite her protestations, removed her cloak and settled onto the couch. "Let's get this sorted, shall we? Lady Lydia would like you to come to Northampton Manor to fit her for a new gown." "Very well. Do you know which day best suits your lady?" "She said as soon as possible, miss." "Let me see," she said, flicking through the pages. Olivia sat herself next to the girl as she opened the large book on her lap, running her finger down all the engagements she had the following day. "Oh, you're in luck. I have a spot tomorrow afternoon. I can be there for around 3 p.m. "You will join us for tea, won't you?" Lady Lydia asked, once her fitting was complete. Olivia rolled up her tape measure and slipped it neatly back into her case. "Only if you're certain, my lady," she replied, feeling at odds to be joining a marchioness for tea. Most of the time she was sent away with the servants, despite her birthright. "I'm absolutely certain," Lady Lydia replied. "Why wouldn't I be?" she said with confidence, checking her reflection in the looking-glass. Her slender fingers moved to repin rogue strands of hair that had escaped around her face. "You are a delight, Miss Olivia. Besides, my husband and his friend Logan should have returned from their horse ride by now. What is tea with only 3? No, it really must be a foursome. I insist upon it." Olivia smiled shyly, but she couldn't deny the thrill of excitement that shivered through her. That morning, she'd walked to the appointment. As she had wound her way through the grounds, she had been in awe of the beautiful landscape, the gardens, so perfectly manicured, and the huge house reminded Olivia of Strawberry Hall, where she had grown up, so called for its rolling fields of English strawberries. It was a bittersweet thought, though Olivia had grown used to her new life, learning to love every day, not only for her parents, but for herself too. But there was no denying the pinch of grief that still presented itself on occasion, like today. In another life, it would have been herself and her mother doing the invite to the dressmaker for tea. "You'll have to excuse the mess in the drawing room," Lady Lydia warned. "It's being decorated, but in my opinion, it's still the best room in the house. The sun that pours through the large windows is just magnificent." Olivia looked around the drawing room as she entered. It was pristine, not a single thing out of place. She pushed away the chuckle that Lady Lydia thought it a mess, certain she was merely being polite. "It's a perfect room, my lady," Olivia dared to say. "Please, do not fret on my account." In the centre of the room was a large, round, dark, mahogany table covered with a delicate white lace cloth. The tea was already in place, a silver pot upon a silver tray, along with a matching milk jug. Next to that was a small pot containing uneven lumps of sugar and the sweetest little tongs. As they took their seats, the maid stepped forward to pour tea. "Sugar, Miss Olivia?" the maid asked, and Olivia realised it was the same girl she had met in her shop. "Please." "She's a darling, my Tessa." Lady Lydia smiled, putting a hand on the girl's arm proprietorially. "She is my right-hand woman, isn't that so?" Yes, my lady. Tessa bowed before stepping back out of sight. Olivia picked up her delicate china teacup. It was then that she spotted the pianoforte at the far end of the room. She paused, the cup halfway to her lips. Inside her was a yearning so strong that she almost rose from her seat to go and play. How dearly she missed playing the pianoforte. But she pushed the desire away. I see you have started without us, my dear. Olivia jumped at the sound of a man's voice. She spun around to see the Marquis himself. Of course we have, Gilbert, Lady Lydia replied. Tea waits for no man. Olivia smiled, but the truth was, she struggled to focus upon the man of the house. It was the man behind him who captured her attention. She could not pull her eyes away from him. He was quite possibly the most handsome man she had ever seen in her life. At the sight of him, she bit her bottom lip, ever so slightly. Are you well, Miss Olivia? What? Olivia spun back around to Lady Lydia's voice, her eyes wide at the realization she was staring. Oh, yes, I'm fine. Thank you. Lady Lydia threw her a knowing smile. Have you met the Duke of Charlington before, dear? No, Olivia stuttered, eyeing the Duke shyly. I can't say I've had the pleasure. Logan, do come forward, Lydia instructed. This is Miss Olivia, my modiste. Olivia closed her eyes, wishing she could vanish after hearing her title. The occasion was so perfect that she had all but forgotten her place in life, and it most definitely was not taking tea with a duke, not any longer. Upon opening her eyes again, she simply had to get another look at the handsome duke. His fiery hair shone red in the sunlight, and curled as any woman would love to own, but it suited him well. She even managed a glimpse at his sky-blue eyes. That was when she realized that beneath their tender gentleness, she sensed pain. He stared back at her, his eyes intense and unrelenting, causing Olivia to shift in her seat. He seemed amused by her, though she supposed that was not unreasonable. Before her stood a duke, a handsome one at that, while she was a mere modiste with a pale complexion and tired eyes. Miss Olivia, the Duke said with a deep monotone to his voice, how nice of you to join us. A cold breath caught in her throat. His looks were attractive enough, but his voice was silky smooth as it sang to her heart. She could have listened to that voice all day long. The woman he married would be a very lucky one indeed, if he was not already taken. For goodness sake, Olivia! She reprimanded herself, forcing her thoughts away. She must focus on work, on raising funds for the medical treatments her ageing parents increasingly needed. She trailed off, her jaw working without sound or reason as she looked at the others around the table. Lady Lydia was clearly bemused, though the Marquis seemed entirely oblivious. Olivia stood up, her chair scraping noisily across the wooden floor. I'm awfully sorry, she spluttered, now unable to meet anyone's gaze. I had quite forgotten, but I have another engagement. Please, do excuse me. With that, she ran from the room, from the house, from the grounds, not once daring to look back. Chapter 2. Don't you think Lady Charlotte looks simply adorable tonight? Emily states as she and Logan take their second turn around the dance floor. The Duke looked in the direction of Lady Charlotte. I can't say I really noticed, he admitted. I suppose she does, but she'll never be as adorable as you. Logan Edenwood, Duke of Charlington, knew exactly what he was supposed to say, even if he didn't mean it. But Emily, his fiancée, smiled in that smug way she sometimes had, a habit he found somewhat irritating, especially when she wasn't being nice. Still, she was a pretty young thing, and he knew he had to remarry sooner or later. Emily, he supposed, was his usual type, if such a thing existed. Born of noble birth and decent wealth, as the daughter of Baron Beckingsdale. Her bright blue eyes stood out against her dark, almost caramel-toned skin. She was, it had to be said, a little on the plump side, but he didn't mind so much. The thick waves of black hair that hung around her shoulders more than made up for it. It was just her smugness he didn't care for. Sometimes she acted as if he were some prize she had won. For some reason, his mind thought back to the demure modiste that he had met at Gilbert's only a few days before. Now that young lady was very different from his fiancée, both in looks and comportment. Yet he could not stop himself thinking of her these past days. Sadly, she is a mere modiste, he reminded himself, and Emily is my chance at producing a respectable family. In truth, it was children he wanted more than anything else, even more than he wanted Emily herself. His parents had died when he was a boy, and he was brought up in the care of his aunt. She had been a cold, harsh woman. For this reason, Logan had promised himself he would raise his own children in a warm and loving environment. If only things didn't fall apart every time I come close to achieving it. You're awfully quiet this evening, Logan. Emily's voice interrupted his thoughts. Am I? He said, blinking at her. I suppose it's because I am so overwhelmed by your beauty, my darling. He smiled weakly, pushing away all negative thoughts. What he had with Emily was a chance to start afresh, something he desperately needed now that he had turned 30. He had to focus on that, on her, and not on what had gone wrong in his past. How he wished he had his lute with him. It was his most treasured possession, and he rarely let it out of sight. He could play for hours, no matter who was around. The music always lifted him out of the doldrums when he felt down, and when he felt good, the music helped him celebrate life. Alas, Emily had made him swear not to bring it. She didn't want him making a spectacle of himself. He'd never looked at it like that before, but he supposed he did always garner a crowd whenever he played in public. Logan wondered idly whether the modiste would like to hear him play. Probably not. It's finished, Emily announced. He looked at her sharply, as if only realizing where he was. I'm sorry. What was that? She stepped back from him, her head tilted in question, and shot him one of her smug looks. The music, Logan. Please do concentrate. The set has ended. We can no longer dance. Oh, I see. Of course. He chuckled, though through discomfort rather than humour. How had he not noticed the music had ended? Had he been that consumed by his thoughts? Emily sighed. Shall we take a walk? She suggested. It is, after all, a beautiful night. Yes, all right, he agreed, thinking the fresh air might help refocus his mind. Out of the house, they strolled into the main body of the garden. It wasn't long before Logan noticed how fast they were walking. It was hardly a pleasant evening stroll. Is everything well, Emily? He asked. She spun around, stopping still. Her face burned with fury, and he instinctively stepped back. What is it? He inquired. You think I don't know why you've been so quiet? She demanded in a fitful state. Heavens, Emily. Words failed him. Even he didn't know why he was being so quiet that evening. You're thinking of her, aren't you? She took a menacing step closer to him, her eyes alight with anger. The modiste? Her? He asked. Who are you talking about? She let out a bark of laughter, throwing her head back in disbelief. I saw you looking at Lady Charlotte. You even said it yourself that she looks adorable this evening. That's not what Emily, this is ridiculous. Logan scoffed at the incredulous accusation. Yes, he had agreed on Emily's comments on Lady Charlotte, but only out of politeness. You would say that, she snarled. You have a wandering eye, Logan Edenwood. You think I can't see it, but I can. I most certainly do not, Logan insisted. Please, Emily, it's not like that at all. I'm not interested in anyone but you. I have eyes only for my love." "And you really expect me to believe that?" "Yes, But before Logan could reply, Emily had turned and stormed away. Logan climbed out of the coach at Regent's Park, sighing with weariness. Ever since his argument with Emily, the night before, he had been dreading this day, the day they were to have a picnic, he and Emily, along with several other friends. It had been in the planning for weeks, and now he wasn't sure Emily would even turn up. Charlington. Logan looked up to see his old friend, Christopher Mountstuart, waving at him with a big grin across his face, his own fiancée hovering behind him. "Nice to see you've made an effort, Mountstuart," Logan teased. "I'd go as far as to say that you have even got yourself a new tailcoat." "Yes, dashing, isn't it?" Christopher smirked, looking over himself. "Say your sweetheart has arrived, though I'd wager she doesn't look as though she feels very sweet." Logan's heart sank. Whether it was at Emily's mood or at her very presence, he could not be certain. "We had words last night," he admitted. "Though, what about, I'm not entirely sure." Christopher guffawed, a hand to his belly. "That's ladyfolk for you, old man," he said. "Always an enigma. Come, everything's already set up. You should see the spread we've got." Logan followed obediently. Christopher was right. The picnic was a generous one, with all the foods one could possibly need for such an event. Seated at the far end of the picnic blanket, legs tucked in as her skirts spread out around her, was Emily. She hadn't noticed him yet as she admired the birds in the trees with a slight smile on her face. Logan smiled, thinking how beautiful and calm she looked, if only she were always that way. "Good morning, Lady Emily," he said with a soft voice. She turned to face him, and her smile slipped. "Good morning," she replied, though rather coldly as she looked away. "I see," he said. "That's how it is, then." Sitting down to the side of the picnic blanket, he placed himself as far away from her as he could. She was still within his sights as other guests began to arrive. Soon the air was filled with chatter and gentle laughter, everyone tucked into sandwiches and salads and cold meats. Wine flowed freely, and Logan enjoyed himself, despite the frost that was hitting him from across the blanket. Once the eating was done, everyone went to do their own thing. Some strolled around the park, while others played tennis on the lawn. As Logan looked around, he realised with surprise that he was the only one left on the blanket. He looked around for Emily, though he had no intentions of approaching her. From her attitude toward him that morning, he had decided she needed space. He didn't wish to argue again, though he was curious as to what she was doing. He should know such things as she was his fiancée after all. He spotted her standing near some trees with another woman, talking animatedly. Watching curiously, he wondered at what their topic of conversation could be. Though he couldn't hear their words, not even a mumble, he noted that Emily was fast becoming more and more fervent by the second. Anxiety twisted its way up his spine. Something wasn't right. He could sense it. Getting to his feet, he thought he should intervene, especially as Emily was now all but shouting. Even worse, the woman she was shouting at was Lady Charlotte. What on earth has got into her? Emily had not noticed that her fiancé watched her. Taking a few steps forward gingerly, he hoped to hear what it was that she was making such a fuss over. Before he could get to her, Emily Roundhouse raised her hand and slapped Lady Charlotte across the cheek, then turned and marched away. Logan's mouth dropped open in horror. He'd never before seen Emily behave in such an unladylike and malicious manner. Poor Lady Charlotte cradled her cheek in her hand. As her friends rushed to her to pull her into their embrace, after a moment of shocked pause, Logan took off after Emily. Whatever was said must have been terrible to make her act in such a way. "Emily, wait!" he called after her as she marched between the trees, quite alone and most obviously upset. "Please, Emily, stop." "I don't want to talk to you," she snapped, her voice high-pitched and tears wetting her pink cheeks. Logan broke into a jog to catch up to her. He grasped hold of her arm and she stopped walking, though she did not turn to look at him. "What happened, Emily?" he pleaded. "You know you can tell me." Slowly she turned to him, her tear-filled eyes lowered to the ground. Emily's chest rose and fell rapidly as she tried to push away the sobs. Logan's heart broke at the sight of her plight. Whatever had happened, it had affected her terribly. "My darling Emily." He spoke softly, ducking his head to catch her eye. "Please tell me what happened. Maybe I can help." "I don't." She took in a deep breath and swallowed hard, before raising her gaze to meet his. Looking up at him through dampened lashes, she spoke with a trembling voice. "You will think me silly." Logan chuckled good-naturedly. "Try me," he said. "If I'm to be your husband, I should be your confidant too." Emily licked her lips, considering her words before she spoke them. "It was about you, actually," she reported. "Lady Charlotte thinks you very handsome." "She said actually that?" he asked, trying to keep the secret delight from his voice. It wasn't that he wanted Lady Charlotte to think him handsome, but compliments always made him feel good about himself. "She did!" Emily barked, sighing as she looked down at her hands. Her fingers twisted around each other as she continued. "She also said that she wished she could find a man like yourself, wealthy and handsome." "I see," Logan replied, a little humbled. He rubbed his chin in consternation, uncertain where this was going. "Is that it?" Emily's head shot up. "What do you mean? What more do you want?" Logan blinked. There had to be more because Emily had slapped her. The whole situation made no sense, and he was awash with confusion. "You struck the poor woman, Emily. Why would you do that?" "Well, because she—" Emily took in a deep, gulping breath and began to sob once again. Stiff with uncertainty, Logan put his arm around her to share some small comfort. There, he hummed. "Why don't you explain it all to me?" Emily looked up at him. "You're my fiancé, Logan, not hers." "Yes, exactly," he agreed, eyebrows raised in surprise. He'd always known she had a jealous streak, but this was a step too far. "I am engaged to you and only you. Why is that not good enough for you?" "I'm sorry," she whimpered. "I feel so paranoid because—" "Because what?" he questioned. "You are paranoid for no good reason." "No," she said quickly. "It's my father. He has always had mistresses and—" "I beg to differ. I am not your father," Logan cried, incredulous. "And," she said, putting emphasis on the word to show her displeasure at his interruption, "it broke my mother's heart. She endured it, Logan. Never saying a word, I hated watching it. Because of my father's indiscretions, I find it hard to trust men now." Logan sighed, feeling himself soften at her tale. She seemed genuinely distraught by what had happened in her parents' marriage, not that it could justify her behaviour. "I'm sorry you experienced such a thing," he said. "I truly am. Though you must understand, I am nothing like your father, Emily. You cannot behave like this. It's unseemly and unkind." "I know. You're right," she muttered, her eyes lowering in shame. "I fear I will suffer as my mother did. It has such a grip on me that I overreact sometimes. I know it's wrong of me." Logan closed his eyes and sighed. He allowed his hand to rest on her shoulder in an attempt to comfort her. Although he wanted her to feel better, naturally, his heart was heavy. A feeling of dread grew inside. As much as he wanted a family, he was no longer certain that Emily was the right woman to be his future wife. "All right," he said, pulling her into a friendly embrace. There now. Everything will be well, I'm sure of it." Chapter 3. Olivia blew through her mouth on the beginnings of the fire. A cold fog formed in the air from her breath, but at least it gently encouraged a small flame in the crumpled-up newspaper sitting under the coals. She had a black smudge across the bridge of her nose, and her pale cream apron was grubby with soot. Every morning, this was her first job of the day, lighting the fire in the small apartment above the modiste shop. There was a time when she would remain in bed as a maid lit the fire in the huge hearth of her bedroom chamber, one of many in the mansion they once called home. "Good morning, darling," her mother's voice called out as she hobbled out of the single bedroom in the apartment. Olivia herself slept on a pallet in the sitting room, and William slept on the chaise. "Morning, mother," she replied with a tired brightness as she clambered to her feet. Her second job of the day was to make breakfast. Making her way to a small but practical kitchen, she slipped a half loaf of bread from its wax paper wrapping. "Bread and butter again?" Angelina asked. "I'm afraid we don't have much butter left," Olivia replied with a sigh. "There should be enough for today. We'll worry about tomorrow when it comes. Is father up yet?" "He's on his way. His hip is playing up again." "Does he need any help?" Olivia asked, concern etched on her face over her father's health. His leg had been broken in the fire that had burned away their wealth, and some days he struggled to walk. "Oh no," Angelina said, waving away her daughter's concern. "He's quite all right, hobbling. You already do more than enough for us, my darling, and we can do nothing for you. Is William awake yet?" "No, I'm letting him sleep as he was restless during the night." "And you talk nonsense, mother," Olivia said, taking the knife and slicing cleanly through the dry loaf. "I consider it my duty to care for my loving family. One slice or two?" "Just one, please," Angelina answered. "Oh, what I wouldn't do for a scrape of marmalade right now." Angelina chuckled and Olivia laughed along with her, though the joke pained her. She would love to be able to provide her mother with marmalade, as much as her mother yearned for it. But the medical bills for her father ate up any spare money she earned. "I'll take 3 boiled eggs this morning, please, cook," her father requested as he limped into the kitchen with a cheerful brightness, despite the evident pain he suffered. "You'll have bread and butter, and you'll like it," Olivia said as she placed an empty plate in front of him. "Ah, but the best bread and butter this side of the Tower of London," he said with a cheery grin. "And where is that son of mine?" he asked, just as a sleepy-eyed William appeared, rubbing at his face. Olivia chuckled. "You are so easy to please, father." "And after all we have endured," Angelina added. "All the more reason to be cheerful," the Earl protested, his mouth now half full of bread as he buttered a piece for William, who sat at the small table with him. "We will have lost everything if we lose our humours too." "Eat up, William," Olivia spoke to her brother, "for I won't be back until this evening. I have appointments right up until 6 o'clock. "You work far too hard, my darling," the Earl said with knitted brows, his jolly demeanour gone. "I work as hard as I need to, in order to support my family. Now, eat." Before another word could be spoken, Olivia slipped from the kitchen and through to her parents' bedroom. She stripped the bed ready to launder the sheets that evening, then replaced them with fresh ones, dusting down the surfaces to rid the spiders of their webs, and continued on to mop the floor, finishing off with a clean cloth to the windows. Olivia sprinted back into the living room and folded up hers and William's blankets, hiding them in a cupboard. dancing through the entire apartment in the same manner. She did so every morning. Once finished with their lodgings, she'd go out to their small garden situated across the street from their building, with William in tow, where once she had played in her mother's rose garden and admired her father's topiary obsession. Now she weeded the vegetable patch and pulled up potatoes and carrots for their evening meal. When she had finished, she stood up to admire her handiwork, wiping her muddy hands on a dirty apron. Every day was hard work, but it was rewarding. She didn't mind at all, not if it meant her parents could live out their lives with contentment in their hearts, especially after what she had done to change their lives. Guilt had consumed her ever since her 12th year of life, on that fateful day when she had fallen asleep with a candle still burning. She had placed the brightness of the candle as close to her bed as she could, to enable her to read a book. As she dozed off, her arm had knocked the candle to the floor, leading to the blaze that had changed their lives forever. They had told her over and again that she had been but a child, that none of it was her fault, that a maid should have checked in on her, but she could never accept such explanations. Overnight, they had become destitute. The luxurious comfort of her first 12 years of life was gone. From there on, she was required to work and put food on her family's table. Olivia had accepted her lot. She would do whatever it took to make up for her failings. She would do everything in her power to care for her parents and younger brother. It was for that reason that she knew marriage could not, should not feature heavily in her thoughts. Returning to the apartment, she freshened up before going down to the shop. While William had gone off to play with some friends he had spotted, she spruced the dust from her hair, adorned one of her carefully handcrafted gowns, and pinched her cheeks in a vain attempt to add a little colour to her face. With a frustrated sigh, she stared at her reflection in the flawed, warped-looking glass. It would have to do. "Goodbye," she called to her parents before trotting down the stairs and out of the shop door. "Remind William to do his reading when he returns." Her mind was busy sorting out her day. She needed to fetch some tea before the shop opened. This was a luxury she afforded her customers to encourage their repeat visits. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," Olivia called to the butcher with a wave. He leant against his doorframe, his moustache so large it hung over his lips. Mr. Miller offered her a half wave of his hand, even though his face reflected the grumpy stare of an old man. Olivia was determined to make him smile one of these days. "Good morning, Miss Olivia," young Nessie called out to her, one of the local maids out running errands for her mistress. "Morning, Nessie. Is that a new bonnet you have upon your pretty hair?" Nessie blushed. "It is that," she replied, her hand going up to touch it. "My lady gifted it to me for my birthday yesterday." "You had a birthday without even a mention." "I did," Nessie said, a proud grin on her face. "Well, many happy returns from all of us," Olivia chirped. "If you pop by the shop later, I'll have something to help you celebrate." She thought to give the girl a curl of ribbon, although it would be an offcut, but large enough to tie in her curly hair. "Miss Olivia! You're looking bright-eyed this morning," another voice called out. It was the grocer, with a smile on his face as he looked her way. He was busy arranging turnips on a colourful stand full of fruits and vegetables outside his shop. "Always, Mr. Wallace. Top of the morning to you." "Indeed," he chuckled. "Off to buy your tea?" "I am at that," she said, walking up to greet him. "And what a lovely day for it." "How are your parents?" he asked. "I think of them often, you know, and their terrible misfortune." Olivia smiled, but there was a sadness reflected in her eyes as she pushed away his mention of their past. She was determined, instead, to focus on his kind consideration. "They are well enough. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Father's leg is playing up again, but you know what he's like. He pretends like it's nothing." I'll wager when I check on his pain medication this evening, it'll be near enough gone." "I almost forgot," Mr. Wallace said, a finger in the air. "I have a little something for you and your family. I was going to give it to young William if he passed me by, but seeing as you're here—" He scurried into his shop. Upon his return, he held a small package wrapped in brown paper, handing it over to her. "Oh no, I couldn't accept this, Mr. Wallace. It's most kind of you, but nothing, Miss Olivia. I won't take no for an answer." He chuckled. "Besides, it's only old stock I can't sell. You know what people are like these days. If it doesn't look perfect, they're not interested." Olivia snickered. "Yet, it tastes the same, no matter the look." "Exactly." He pushed the package into her hands. "Take it, and enjoy, or it shall go to the dogs." Though she felt a twinge of guilt at accepting the help, she took it gratefully. It would certainly help add a little variety to their diet, something they often lacked. "You really are too kind, Mr. Wallace. Heaven is missing one of its angels." He shrugged shyly, but the smile on his face told Olivia he was pleased by her compliment. "We have more vegetables than we know what to do with, and you have— well, after what happened, I know things are hard for you." "That they are," Olivia agreed, shifting uncomfortably. "If I can take on a few more clients, it should—" "But you shouldn't have to," Mr. Wallace insisted. "It's not your place in life, is it? You're noble-born and you should live as such. A terrible tragedy it was, when that fire consumed your home." "Yes, it was indeed," Olivia said, her tone now subdued. "I should get on, Mr. Wallace. I have appointments all afternoon." She held the parcel in the air. "Thank you for this. I'll be sure to mention you to my parents." Olivia walked away at speed, hearing Mr. Wallace's farewells behind her. She hadn't wanted to be rude, but she could not bear it when folk talked about the fire. It brought up so many difficult memories for her. Even worse was that it was so long ago. So much had changed since then, including Olivia herself, and she wished others could move on as she had. By the time she returned to her shop, tea in hand, Lizzie had already opened up. The seamstress was cutting out pattern pieces at the back of the shop, her tongue stuck out of the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. "Busy already, I see, Lizzie," Olivia mentioned, putting her load down. She shrugged off her cloak and hung it on the hook behind the door. "Always, Miss Olivia. You know me. I don't like idle hands. Besides, Lady Roberts's girl called in this morning, wants her gowns a day sooner than expected, and you've got fittings to attend all afternoon." "Yes, we've a busy day ahead of us." "The shop's getting much busier by the day," Lizzie muttered, her eyes upon her work. "At this rate we'll need another pair of hands to help us out." Olivia chuckled. "As much as I would like that, we'll have to make do with William," she surmised. "I fear it's not quite busy enough yet. We both have families to feed." Lizzie shot her a disapproving look. "My boys are grown and long flown the nest," she pointed out, "as you well know." "Yes, but— and you are yet to have a family." Olivia took in a deep breath to calm herself. "I appreciate that, but—" "Don't leave it too long," Lizzie said, putting the scissors down and looking up at Olivia with a serious glare. "Once it's too late, there's no going back." Olivia smiled nervously. This was one of Lizzie's favourite topics of conversation, and one of Olivia's most miserable. Her assistant simply didn't understand Olivia's motives of why she did not wish to marry. She could never desert her parents and her brother. "I appreciate your kind thoughts," Olivia replied tartly. "Alas, there is presently no man who would wish to marry me, and certainly no man I have any interest in either. So, let's get back to work, shall we? Except there is—" A small voice in her head echoed as an image of the red-headed Duke at Lady Lydia's tea flashed through her mind. She knew nothing about him, bar his name, rank, and handsome features. Yet, a part of her had not stopped thinking about him since the moment they met. Chapter 4. "I'm so glad you persuaded us to come," Olivia said to her parents as they all four slipped into their seats. Her chest thrummed with excitement. They hadn't done anything for the sheer enjoyment of it for such a long time. When her father first suggested they get tickets for the travelling theatre, Olivia had been uncertain. Money was always needed elsewhere, considering that they sometimes struggled to put food on the table or afford the medical bills. The price of tickets seemed a flamboyant expense. On top of that, Olivia was concerned for her father's health, wondering whether he would be able to walk to the theatre and back. Still, he had persuaded her. He had spoken excitedly of the evening because the poster had reminded him of his younger days when he'd attended every performance he could. He had told William that once he'd even had grand ideas of joining a troupe and becoming an actor. Thankfully, his father had corrected him, much to William's disappointment. Frank Dickens had been so animated when he had been telling William about his youth that Olivia simply could not refuse his request. His excitement had been so infectious, and she too had felt a glimpse of happiness, even if only for a few moments. "I know I say it all the time, but you work far too hard, my girl," the Earl said, groaning as he lowered himself into a chair further along the row. Her mother settled next to him. "He's right, Livy. You deserve a little fun." Olivia remained standing, checking on her parents and brother before she allowed herself to sit with her mother, and next to her was presently a row of empty seats. "Well, this is certainly fun," Olivia remarked. "Is it not, William?" "I'll say it is, sister," William replied with an enthusiastic nod of his head. She looked around the temporary theatre that had been set up in the town hall. They had built a stage in the centre. Seats surrounded the stage so it could be seen by the audience on every side. Along one edge there was a wide aisle, where the players would enter and exit, Olivia presumed. There were even garlands strung along the wall and across the front of the stage. The room filled with excited chatter as all the seats were taken. Olivia could sense strangers all around her, but she didn't pay them any mind. She was far too caught up in the moment, admiring the stage and the glimpses of actors shuffling around in the background. "Shush 'em!" her mother said excitedly as she grabbed at Olivia's hand, and William's at the other side as he was wedged between his mother and father. "I think they're about to start." She was right. The silence settled over them like a blanket, slowly at first, then smothering the noise entirely. Olivia held her breath, her body tense with anticipation, as she was unable to pull her eyes from the stage. The sensation grew stronger as the players danced onto the stage. The play was a love story that took Olivia through every emotion she could imagine. Even William was mesmerised by the story. Some scenes made her laugh, others made her smile. When the tale was laced with moments of tragedy, Olivia felt the tears slipping down her cheeks. As she sniffled, she felt a soft piece of fabric being pushed into her left hand. A handkerchief, she realised. "Thank you," she muttered quietly, raising it to her eyes to dab at the damp tears. She turned to see who her rescuer was, grateful to the stranger for their kindness. "Thank you again." "Oh!" Olivia's mouth fell open in surprise and horror. "It's you," she said with a high pitch to her tone. The man smiled knowingly, raising his eyebrows at her before returning his attention to the play. Olivia gaped at him for a moment more. When she turned back to the play, she found she could no longer concentrate on it. Now all she could think of was him. The Duke was seated next to her, and she'd used his handkerchief. Taking a few deep, steadying breaths, she tried, and failed, to refocus her attention on the play. The Duke was as handsome as she had remembered. Part of her had thought that perhaps she had imagined it, that she had remembered him better than he actually was. But no. Seeing him again now made her realise how attractive he was, and she felt an indefinable pull toward him. Unable to stop herself, she turned her head for another glance at him. Quickly, she looked back at the stage, but it was only mere seconds before she looked at him for a third time, her mouth falling open with a deep desire to know him, to talk to him, and to be with him. But I barely know him, she scolded herself for such foolishness. A handsome face, and she had turned to jelly, like a silly young girl. Yet there was something about him, some unknowable drive that pushed her to him, though she knew he was a duke, and she a mere modiste, even with her birthright. She would have given anything in that moment for him to lavish his attention on her. He turned to look at her, and she let out a little gasp, turning away quickly. Her heart raced at the realization that she'd been caught staring, and she held herself perfectly still as his eyes fixed upon her face. "Are you well?" her mother whispered from the other side, a hand clasping hold of hers. Olivia replied through tight lips, nodding frantically but not daring to move her head for fear she would turn it in the wrong direction again. She had no clue what happened in the rest of the play, though she guessed the unfortunate lovers found a way to be together in the end. At least she hoped so, but it was not something she could think about, not with the Duke so close by. When the play ended, the audience erupted into applause with many on their feet in a standing ovation. William was allowed to stand on his chair to see over the tops of people's heads. Olivia was pulled along by the crowd, joining in the celebration. As the noise died down and people turned to gather their belongings, the Duke looked at her and her parents directly. "Well," he said with a broad smile, "what a surprise to see you once again." "Do you know this young man?" the Earl asked, leaning over with his brow heavily furrowed in confusion. "Oh, please," Logan said, "do accept my apologies. How rude of me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Logan Edenwood, the Duke of Charlington." Angelina let out a squeak of surprise and delight, a hand flying to her chest as her eyelids fluttered. Olivia could tell that her mother was smitten. It seemed that Logan had that effect on other women, and not only her. That made him all the more attractive in her view. "Your Grace," the Earl said, bowing his head, "pleased to make your acquaintance, Frank Dickens, Earl of Essex." "Essex?" Logan questioned, furrowing his own brow. "I know of you, my lord, and I have heard of your misfortunes. Please allow me to express my sympathies." "No, thank you," the Earl said firmly. "As kind as your sympathies are, as a family we have deduced that we must not be pitied nor be pitiful a moment longer." Olivia smiled at her father's words. He had said them often enough, but there were times when even he struggled to believe them. She knew he said it mostly to convince himself. But now she could see that his intention was to impress the Duke. "What a refreshing way to think," the Duke said with enthusiasm. He paused, looking at Olivia and causing her cheeks to flush almost fuchsia. "I don't know whether your daughter mentioned this or not, but we have actually met." "You have?" Her mother was shocked and looked from Olivia to the Duke and back again, searching for answers. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, wishing he hadn't mentioned the tea at Lady Lydia's. "Indeed," she said, forcing a smile. "I fitted the Marchioness of Northampton for a new gown at her home last week. She invited me for tea afterwards, and that's where I met His Grace." "She invited you for tea?" her mother asked, again showing her delight. "How lovely." "Alas, the moment was brief, and it did not allow me the opportunity to get to know you, my lady," Logan said to Olivia. "You disappeared rather suddenly." "My lady?" Olivia blushed at the title, embarrassed by the fact that she had dashed away. She may be the daughter of an earl, but she was also a dressmaker and a worker, in essence, a pauper, while he was a wealthy duke. I'm sorry, she stammered. I had other appointments, unfortunately. It's not important anymore, he said, waving away her concern, because today we've had the fortune of running into each other again with a new opportunity to talk. Oh, yes, I suppose, Olivia responded, her voice barely more than a squeak. Say, would you care to take a walk? Logan asked. I must be honest, you intrigued me the other day. I'd like the chance to get to know you and your family a little better. Olivia sucked in her breath. I had intrigued him. She had thought it only possible to be the other way around. Looking to her father, her eyes pleaded for permission, but there was no need to ask. The Earl looked genuinely delighted at the prospect and smiled at his daughter, nodding his agreement. Keep William by your side. She couldn't stop the grin from spreading up her cheeks. In that case, Your Grace, my brother and I would love to accompany you. Excellent, Logan said, getting to his feet. Please, there is nothing I hate more than formalities. Call me Logan. The Duke had not intended on bumping into the modiste, but when he'd entered the theatre, he'd spotted her immediately. To his delight, the seat next to hers had been empty. The temptation too great, he took it. Although he had expected her to say something straight away, but it took a while for her to even notice him. This had provided him with ample opportunity to admire her. She was as beautiful as he had remembered from their brief meeting at Northampton Manor. Her flesh, pale as pale could be, had an ethereal quality to it that made him want to reach out and cup her cheek. Her locks were like a soft, molten gold. It was more than that. She was graceful and elegant in a way that few commoners could achieve. Of course, when her father introduced himself as the Earl of Essex, her refinement made sense. She was born into it. Stepping out of the hall and onto the main stretch of road, there was a perfect, but nervous, silence. Ahead of them was a small park that Logan remembered from when he was a boy. He guided Olivia in that direction, aware of her brother William holding her hand and her parents walking a few paces behind to chaperone them. Logan searched around for something to say, finding himself shy for the first time in a very long while. He could not put his finger on why, but Olivia Dickens seemed to have a rather odd effect on him. What did you think of the play? He asked eventually. I enjoyed it, she said. And you? It's not the sort of thing I usually attend, but something lured me there tonight. What was that? She asked, tilting her head to look up at him. He shrugged. Fate, perhaps. I would never have bumped into you, otherwise. He watched as she hid a shy smile, evidently not wanting to appear too keen. How charming, she finally said, raising a teasing eyebrow in his direction. Chuckling, he quite liked how forthcoming she was, and that she had confidence in herself. She did not seem at all intimidated by his status, and that pleased him very much. So many ladies were interested in his wealth and title, but not in him. Yet, Olivia didn't appear to be influenced by any such nonsense. She seemed more to want to get to know only him, and it bolstered him, making him feel good. If this is not the sort of thing you usually attend, she said, drawing his attention back to her, what exactly is it you normally do in your spare time? Oh, that's an easy one, he replied. Music. I adore all music. She gasped and stopped walking, spinning around to face him. Truly? Logan frowned in confusion. Yes. Why? A giggle escaped her lips as she let go of her brother's hand. It's just that I too adore music. I don't get the opportunity to listen as often as I once did, and I certainly have not played in such a very long time, but goodness, I love. Did you say played? He asked, catching the word with intrigue. Her cheeks flushed for the third time that evening, another quality he found endearing. She continued walking, her focus once again on the path in front of them. I used to play the pianoforte before. She trailed off, and he could sense her discomfort at discussing her life before the fire. Well, let's simply say, before. I enjoy piano recitals. Can I hear you play one day? He asked, thinking perhaps she could play on the pianoforte in his own house, but not daring to suggest such a thing so soon in their friendship. She scoffed lightly. Perhaps, one day, I would like to play again. If I do, you are certainly welcome to listen. Have you ever heard the lute? He asked, looking at her from the side of his eyes to gauge her true reaction. She frowned as she thought, and then, when she hit upon a memory, her face lit up in the most delightful way. Yes, she said brightly, now you mention it, I do believe I have. When I was a child, we travelled to the Scottish borders to visit family. It was there that a cousin of mine played the lute for us. Would you like to hear it again? Here and now? Olivia stopped in her tracks once again, her eyes lit up with excitement. Do you play? She asked in surprise. I do, he admitted. I love to play. It is one of the best things in my life. Would you like to hear a song now? She laughed, the sound of her merriment as beautiful as any music. But how is that going to be possible? She asked in dismay. He winked, then raised his hand and clicked his fingers. A footman, one who had clearly been hanging in the shadows, appeared with a lute at his side. Your Grace, the footman said, bowing as he handed the instrument over. Olivia laughed again. Do you have a footman just for carrying your lute around? She asked. He shrugged. Only when I'm somewhere I can't carry it myself, he said prudently, and positioned the lute across his chest. I take my instrument everywhere. You never know when one will get the opportunity to play. He began to pluck at the strings, playing a sweet love song. She watched him intently, her gaze shifting between his eyes and his fingers. It was as mesmerizing as he had intended it to be, and that only served to endear her to him even more. Anyone who appreciated his music was worth his time. As he watched her observing him, he became aware of a small group of people forming around them. Though it was normal for him, whenever and wherever he played, he always attracted attention. He liked it, and hoped Olivia did too. He soon began performing for the crowd, immersing himself into his music and turning to smile at those who had gathered to listen to him play. There were many young ladies, some of common birth, but many nobles too. The group grew by the minute. When he reached the end of the song, he lowered the lute and raised his eyes to meet Olivia's. Except she wasn't there. Spinning around, thinking maybe he'd turned himself around as he was playing, he sought his new friend in the crowd. There were so many people. The more he searched, the more he realized there was no sign of Olivia or her parents. She was gone. Nowhere to be seen. Logan's shoulders slumped with utter disappointment. Chapter 5. The following morning, Logan went for a stroll through town in order to distract himself from his thoughts, his lute dangling from his fingers in case the opportunity arose to play. He'd been awake all night, going over all that had happened the previous evening, although he'd searched for whatever he might have done wrong to cause Olivia's disappearance. He could think of nothing. Did she not like my music? He tried not to let it get to him. After all, he barely knew her. Yet, why was he so affected by her vanishing? She had seemed so interested in him, and he was most certainly enchanted by her. Now, he was consumed by confusion and hurt. no matter what he told himself. "Afternoon, Giles," he said, nodding his head to the passing farmer. "Your Grace." Giles ducked his head and hurried on by with whatever task in hand. Logan was pleased to see the farmer going about his day in the back of his mind. No matter what was going on in his life, he always took the time to talk with the townsfolk and get to know them. Not many of upper society agreed on mixing with commoners, but Logan had never paid them much heed. It was vital, he believed, to use his privilege to do good and help those who needed it most. Every person in town held a place of their own, with their own importance, even if they weren't lucky enough to be born into wealth. "Mrs. Jenkins, how is your mother?" he asked as a slender woman dashed past him, a basket of fresh vegetables hanging from her arm. "Oh, she's not doing half as well, Your Grace," Mrs. Jenkins said, looking harassed as she stopped and turned. "It must be very difficult for you," Logan replied. "I won't keep you. I'm sure you have plenty to get on with." "Don't I, Alf?" she replied with a roll of her eyes before she turned and was swallowed by the crowd of shoppers. Watching her pass him by brought Olivia back to Logan's mind, and he sighed. He couldn't put his finger on why she was so firmly fixed in his mind, but nor could he shake her from his thoughts. There was something about her, what with her heady mix of nobility and commoner all in one. That alone was intriguing enough, but her grace and beauty added to the mix was also ample to overwhelm even the strongest of men. "Enough," he scolded himself, and made his way to the park just behind the main row of shops. Sitting down on a bench, he forcefully banished all thoughts of Olivia, raising his lute to play. Even before the first note rang out, Logan noticed some boys in the distance, watching him with timid curiosity. In the long days of summer, he would often sit in the park and teach the young commoners to play, or at least perform for them. It was one of those things he enjoyed doing. A small way to give back to his community, even though the boys would never be able to play again, for he knew their chances of obtaining a lute were slim at best. He kept an eye on the intrigued boys, knowing that those drawn to music were the ones he wanted to teach. His love of music was innate, and Logan saw the passion and spark in those lured by his performance. Today, only one boy approached. His movements were slow and uncertain, but he was clearly enchanted by the sounds coming from Logan's fingers. Logan allowed his smile to grow, but he didn't stop playing until he reached the end of the piece. Once completed, he looked up at the boy and grinned. "Do you like music?" he asked. The boy could not have been more than 10 or 11 years old, and had that skinniness that only energetic children seem to have. His eyes glistened over the chocolate brown of his irises, and his sandy-coloured hair was mussed. As the Duke looked him over, he felt there was something familiar about the child, but brushed the thought aside. The boy was nodding his head up and down, his lips pressed firmly together. "Have you ever played an instrument?" Logan asked. With the same tight lips, the boy shook his head. "Tell me, young man, what is your name?" "William, sir," he replied. "Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, William. My name is Logan." "I know your name. Are you rich?" the boy asked, his eyes inquisitive rather than rude. The question caused Logan to snort with a gentle laughter. "I suppose in many ways I am indeed, yes," he answered. "I do believe that we're all rich in different ways." The boy tilted his head, confused by Logan's words, causing Logan to chuckle again. "Perhaps that's a little too philosophical for today." "Philo what?" The boy blinked, bewildered. "William, let me guess how old you are. 25?" The boy rolled his eyes, too old for such gentle mockery. Logan understood instantly that he was no fool. It was clear that he'd had more education than most boys in his situation, and this intrigued him. Here was a boy with the same gracefulness as Olivia, a commoner with the breeding of nobility, perhaps. "I'm 10, William spoke up, his chest puffed out with pride. "But I'm much closer to 11 than I am to 9. "11, Logan repeated with humouring wide eyes. "Now that is old." William giggled. "Will you play me another song, sir?" Without the need for words, Logan merely clutched his lute to his chest and plucked idly at the strings. Settling upon a jaunty, bright tune, he began playing, and the boy jumped up to dance around him. By the time he had finished, William fell onto the bench, laughing loudly. The sound filled Logan's heart with love and compassion. At the same time, he also felt a bittersweet pinch of grief for the family he himself was yet to have. "Do you live nearby, William?" Logan asked, suddenly driven to find out more about this sweet child. William tensed. "I'm not sure I should say—" "Very sensible," Logan acknowledged. "I could be a thief or a vagabond." William frowned and openly looked Logan up and down. "You don't look much like a thief, but father says one never knows." "Your father sounds like a very intelligent man. I wonder if he's someone I may know." William shrugged. "I think you do. Most people have heard of him, though I can't say I know why. He's the Earl of Essex, but he has never done anything special that I can think of, and we're not rich." "The Earl of Essex?" Logan gasped in surprise. That would explain the similarities in demeanour between young William and the beautiful Olivia. They were the same because they were siblings. This was the young man who had been at the play with Olivia and her parents. "You are honoured to have such a family, William," Logan praised. "Never forget that." William shrugged again, looking down at the dirt on his shoes with his lips in a pout. Logan felt a rush of affection for this boy. Though the fire happened before he was even born, he must have had a difficult time growing up, as his family needed to adjust to their new situation. "I suppose you're right," William agreed. "Say, how would you like to learn to play the lute?" Logan asked. That was why he had come to the park after all, but an idea had presented itself to the situation. If William was willing to learn, perhaps they could meet again, and that could lead to meeting Olivia once more. William snorted with laughter. "But I don't have a lute." "You can use mine while you're learning," Logan countered. "And when our lessons have finished." William sighed, a sound that made him old beyond his years. "It's a nice idea, sir, but I don't think making music is for the likes of me." Logan gasped. "Making music is for everyone," he insisted. "You never know what might happen in the future. If you start learning now, perhaps your situation will have changed by the time we've finished. Besides, learning to play well takes time, William. It's not something that happens in a day." William narrowed his eyes suspiciously, but Logan could see him softening. "Why me?" he asked. "Because I can see the love for music in your soul," Logan replied. The boy fell quiet, leaning back on the bench so he could look out over the park. Logan joined him and the pair watched as the other boys tussled in the distance. "All right," William said finally. "All right?" Logan repeated, more excited than the boy himself. "Yes," William said, turning back to Logan with a grin. "But I think I'll have to check with my sister first." "Your sister? What about your parents?" William waved a hand. "They are old and will not understand. My father can hardly walk some days. My sister cares for me most of the time. She runs our house and earns a crust to buy our food." "I see." Logan chewed his lip in consternation. The young woman he met had seemed so dynamic, so full of life, yet, with a life such as William described, he wondered how it was possible. "What is your sister's name?" he asked. "Olivia," William replied. He said the name so matter-of-factly. It was just a name to him that connected him to his sister. But the sound of it set Logan's mind aflame, his heart beating faster. It was, indeed, one and the same, the modiste he had become so terribly enchanted by. "Oh, Olivia," he stuttered, forcing himself to smile. "That is a beautiful name." "I suppose." William shrugged, never really thought about it. "I have an idea," Logan said. "Why don't we go and ask her right this very minute?" William turned to him in surprise. "Right now?" "But that way, we'll know her answer right away, and I can get the chance to, meet your family." William twisted his lips uncertainly. "I don't know if that's such a good idea, sir." Logan jumped up from the bench, energized by the possibility of seeing Olivia again. "To your house we shall march, with not a moment to lose, William, and in return, I shall give you a sugar plum for your troubles." It was a sweet temptation that young William found hard to resist, and he jumped up with much enthusiasm. He was sure his sister liked music too, so what was there to lose? Chapter 6. Olivia was seated in the backyard of their humble home, a luxury, soft fabric draped over her own dreary dress, as she carefully stitched along the hem of one of her gowns. As Lizzie said, the shop had been busy of late, for which she was grateful. But it did mean that she had to work all hours. At least she could sit in the early evening sun and enjoy the fresh air. The yard was small and simple, the ground unsuitable for vegetables, and so decorated with a small table and chairs instead. They had spent many a summer evening there, taking tea or having a picnic as they used to in the old days. In the winter, it was less pleasant, icy and drab, and a place one kept the door tightly shut. But still, it was a part of her home, and that was all that mattered. The large door behind Olivia led directly into the back room of the shop, one of 3 entrances to the modiste. To her left, there was a set of outdoor steps that led up the side of the building and into the apartment above. There was another door, another set of stairs indoors that also led to the shop from the apartment. The building was neither grand nor fancy, but to Olivia it was home, and she felt comfortable there. The yard a place where she felt most at peace after a long, hard day. She hummed to herself as she watched her nimble fingers slip around the silk, though, for some reason, she felt a bolt of self-pity in her heart. She remembered watching those very same nimble fingers working their way up and down a pianoforte once, so long ago. The music flowed from her soul and through her fingers to the instrument, and ultimately out into the world. How she missed music and her ability to make it. She had not realized then how much of a privilege it was to be able to create art and music, like the Duke of Charlington enjoyed every day. Oh no! The thought of the Duke had come on so suddenly that she pricked her finger with the needle. A spot of red smudged across the yellow fabric. She raised the finger to her mouth, sucking on it until the blood stopped, then folded the fabric back into her basket, throwing the needle on top in dismay. Ever since she had met the Duke, her mind had been in disarray, and she found herself making silly mistakes, pricking her finger, miscutting her fabric, or worse, losing a thread of conversation with an important customer. Olivia knew that she had near enough fallen in love with him when he had played for her the night before, after they'd left the theatre. The way he played the lute had taken her breath away, and she recognised his musical soul. But the more he played, the larger the crowd of women began to gather around him. As Olivia had observed them, her joyful feelings turned into ones of dread and horror. They were women in beautiful ball gowns and emanating so much wealth, each one beautiful, as they listened to the Duke, and many of them ladies that she herself had measured for new wardrobes. How could I have stayed among them? she asked herself, sighing as she slipped all her needlework back into the basket. He would have been so embarrassed to be seen with me. There was simply no way that he could possibly be attracted to someone like her, someone pale and uninteresting, and a modiste of all things. He had so many other options. For that reason, she had slipped away through the crowd, embarrassed for him, and full of burgeoning emotions that she did not understand. Standing up, she stretched her back before bending down to pick up the basket. It was time to go inside and make a start on tea. But what was that sound? Olivia could hear music, although ephemeral and detached. It was getting ever closer. She frowned and turned in the direction of the alleyway that led between the houses to the main street. What a beautiful sound it was, so very calming and sweet. Very much, she realised, like the music from the night before. Could it be? She raised herself to her tiptoes, as if that would somehow help her see better, but it did not. Falling back to her heels, she spotted him. Logan had rounded the corner into their small yard, lute in hand, and a smile on his face as a cloud of sweet music sounded out. Olivia held her breath, unsure whether seeing him delighted or terrified her. A wave of pleasure washed through her at the sight of him, but the same fear she had felt the night before simmered beneath the surface. "How did you—" she began to question, but as she did so, her brother's face appeared from behind the music maker, his smaller body still hidden by Logan's large stature. "William!" she cried. "What on earth?" William stepped into full view as Logan lowered his lute and tilted his head. The gleam in the Duke's eyes was one of amusement and happiness, though Olivia wasn't entirely sure how to read it. Is he mocking me, or is he genuinely pleased to see me as I am with him? Olivia held her body tense, though when Logan said nothing, she knew she had to take the lead. "Your Grace! What a surprise!" "Your Grace!" William's surprise came out as a squeak. "Are you a duke, sir?" Logan chuckled and nodded. "Of Charlington," he explained. "But people treat me differently when they find out, and I was enjoying our conversation too much for that to happen." "I'll still get my sugar plum, won't I?" "William, don't be so rude," Olivia reprimanded, but Logan merely snickered again. "It's quite all right," he said. "And yes, William, I am a man who sticks by his word. You shall have your sugar plum." Olivia swallowed back her confusion, determined to make a stand. Though she was naturally shy and under no illusions as to her status, this was her home, and she had a right to know what was going on. "At the risk of sounding impertinent, Your Grace, may I please ask what you are doing here?" "I found your brother playing with some other boys in the park," Logan explained. "Heavens, boy, you haven't been getting up to no good, have you?" Olivia asked, eyes wide with horror at the prospect. "I shall have to tell father and—" "No," Logan interrupted. "Not at all. I was there playing my lute, and he showed an interest." William's head popped up again, showing a toothy grin. "May I learn to play the lute, Olivia?" Olivia scoffed lightly, but then looked at her brother with pity. She understood the drive to want music in one's life. "I wish you could, William, but where in the world would we find that sort of money?" "Money is of no object," the Duke interrupted. "That is a phrase used only by those who have it, and not by those who have to work for it," she snapped, an icy chill running through her words. Logan held up his hands in submission. "You are right, of course," he admitted. "I didn't mean to offend Miss Olivia. I meant only that there will be no cost involved in this instance. I shall teach your brother to play the lute completely free of charge." "But why?" she asked, unused to such kindness from strangers. Logan shrugged. "Music is the most important thing in the world. I have no one to pass my knowledge on to, so allow me to take this opportunity to do so while I can." Olivia, in her surprise, leaned against the wall of the building. She was overwhelmed by such kindness. Few men, or even women, would be so benevolent. Olivia could not help but wonder if the Duke had an ulterior motive. Looking back up at him, her brow creased in a frown. "What are you really doing here?" she asked, looking around at her humble surroundings and her basket of work on the ground. "I really do want to teach your brother to play the lute," he insisted, taking a tentative step forward. He bowed his head in the hope of catching her eye. But she did not look up. "Last night, you disappeared without saying goodbye." "I dot," she began, but she was lost for words. His lips twisted into a gentle smile, and his voice boomed out with confidence. "I thought perhaps I should come and seek an apology." Her head shot up, and she glared at him, astounded by his rudeness. Once she saw the teasing in his eyes, she found herself giggling. "You went through all this trouble of finding me, simply for an apology?" she asked. "It was no trouble," he explained. "I asked the universe to help me, and fate found a way of bringing us together once again." Olivia had to smile at the romance of it. She had never really believed in fate, but perhaps there was something to it. "You were awfully busy last night, with all those young ladies gathered around you. They were very keen to listen to your music," she said. "I felt it better to leave them to it." "That's not an apology," he remarked, an eyebrow raised. Olivia giggled again. "Very well," she said. "I am—" But as she was about to say she was sorry, her brother tried to dart past her and into the shop. She grabbed for his collar, pulling him back. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded. "To tell Mother and Father that I'm going to be learning the lute," he said, glaring at her in defiance. "You cannot leave me here alone with a gentleman," she cried, "or everyone in the street will be talking." Though they were now poor, the Earl of Essex was still a stickler for proper moral behaviour. If he knew that Olivia had been left chaperone-free in the presence of a duke, even for a moment, he would be horrified. William huffed and plonked himself heavily onto the stone steps, arms folded in front of him. When Olivia turned back to Logan, the playful mood of a moment ago seemed to have vanished. He stared at her in silence, his expression a questioning one. Olivia shifted under the weight of his gaze, wishing he had not come to her at all. It had only served to prove that she had been a fool to dream. She looked down at her grubby work apron, then back up at his tailcoat, all pristine and polished. How could she have believed, even for a second, that he could be interested in her? How could she have imagined that finding her meant anything other than bored amusement for a man like him? "Very well," she said, offering him a weak smile. She turned to pick up her basket and make her way up the first couple of steps. "It was nice to see you once again, Your Grace," she said. "Perhaps we will bump into one another some other time." "Wait!" he called. She blinked and turned to him, one hand resting on the banister while the basket dangled from the other. "Yes?" "I've only just found you again," he said. "You cannot disappear so soon." She let out a little humourless laugh. "I cannot possibly fathom your reasons for going to such effort," she said. He looked surprised, as though it should be obvious, but it wasn't. At least, it wasn't to Olivia. "I am here playing the lute for you, after bribing your brother with a sugar plum. Can you not tell I am intrigued, nay, enchanted by you?" Enchanted? Olivia's heart raced at his words, so tender, so sweet, and she could not stop herself from smiling. But surely he must be mistaken. Or perhaps this was some trick for the amusement of the men at a club. She raised a hand to lift her skirt, showing him the fabric. "That cannot be so," she announced. "How could a duke possibly be interested in someone like me?" Logan laughed out loud, But his jest was not a cruel one. It was more a laugh of dawning realization than anything else. "My dear Miss Olivia," he said, "I would not be here if I were not interested. I care not for your social standing nor your circumstances in life. I only have an interest in your wealth and in how such poverty affects you. But ever since we met at Northampton Manor, I have felt a connection to you. I cannot explain it, and nor do I wish to. I want only to explore it, especially as it has only gotten stronger every time I see you." Quite without realizing, Olivia's mouth hung open. She was shocked, certainly. Yet a warmth of happiness spread around her body. A tingle tickled down her spine at the notion of their connection. Yes, she too had felt it, without a doubt. "If you too are also interested," he continued, throwing her a cocky smile, "then perhaps we can get to know each other a little better. May I dare to suggest that we begin to court?" Olivia gasped. She was most definitely interested in this kind, talented, handsome man. Could it be possible? Had she misunderstood what he was saying? After a long silence, Logan swallowed and looked at her sadly. "From your silence, I take it that you have no interest," he asked. "I am so sorry to have wasted your time, Miss Olivia." It was as he began to turn away that Olivia ran down the few steps she had only just mounted, rushing toward him with her hand out. "No, wait!" she called out. "Please, do not leave." He turned back to her, questioning and curious, a spark of hope alighting his eyes. "It does not mean that at all," she told him. "I am somewhat surprised, that's all, because I know the connection you speak of. I feel it too. I would love for us to become better acquainted, Your Grace." Logan's smile turned into an extra-large grin. "I am so pleased to hear that, Miss Olivia, but I must ask you once again to call me Logan. Your Grace is far too formal." Olivia's cheeks flushed, but she smiled all the same, glancing up at him through her lashes. "Very well, Logan." He nodded, satisfied, then moved to push past her and enter the house. "Where are you going?" she asked, turning to follow his progress. He stopped halfway up the steps. "Why? I'm going to ask for your parents' permission to court their daughter, of course." Chapter 7. When Logan played the lute, he both lost and found himself in the music. It washed away all his woes, but also freed his mind to think with more clarity. It had been like that for the last 3 days, when Logan had locked himself at home with thoughts confused and wild. He let his fingers work while his mind wandered. He'd asked Olivia's parents for permission to court her, and they had granted it. As soon as he had arrived home, his thoughts had been twisted with grief and hesitation. Finding love and having a family had been his only dream for so long, and he'd come close more than once. So close. Now there was a spark of hope again, yet he could not stop the guilt and worry churning in his gut. What if I make a mess of it again? He was entirely enamoured with Olivia. She was his first thought in the morning, and his last before he went to sleep. His inner consciousness injected her into his dreams and into everything he did during the day. But it could all go wrong again. He'd ruined it before. What if he did that again? Logan sighed, his fingers moving quickly over the strings as the music beat grew faster and louder with his tangled emotions. He held his breath as the notes came to a rapid crescendo. Before cresting the wave, a glass placed heavily on the table crashed to the floor and jerked him from his thoughts. "As much as I could stand here and listen to you all day, I thought I'd best stop you before you jump over the edge, old man." "Gilbert!" Logan's frown grew into an amused grin upon seeing his friend. "I see you've already poured brandy." "Sounds to me like you need it," Gilbert replied, allowing himself to fall into the armchair next to Logan's, his own brandy in hand. "Come on then. I have not ridden my horse all this way for nothing. Out with it." Logan glanced sideways at him, his hand halfway to the brandy glass. Out with what? Gilbert snorted. How long have we known each other, Logan? Am I not married to your prettiest of cousins, the beautiful Lydia? You are a lucky fellow indeed, and we've known one another for as long as I can remember, Logan replied. Exactly, Gilbert nodded, pointing at Logan with his brandy glass. You only ever play that frantically when you've got something on your mind, my friend. So, come on, out with it. Logan sighed and lowered his lute to the floor next to his chair. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes tiredly. Gilbert was the best of friends, and they always told each other everything. But right at that moment, he did not know if he had the capacity to put his muddled thoughts into words. Gilbert Greenmom, Marquis of Northampton, was Logan's best friend in the entire world. They had grown up together on neighbouring estates, and the pair had shared every aspect of their young lives, from victories to heartaches, though there seems to be so much more of the latter lately. Gilbert was a bright, cheery young man, never one to let things get him down. His temper was matched by his fiery red hair, though his cheeks were more often redder than they were white, and sprinkled with freckles that danced across his nose. Your hair's a mess, Logan said, looking up at the spiky peaks. I've been riding, Gilbert explained. Don't change the subject. You could have run a comb through it before you came to see your oldest and dearest friend, Logan teased. Am I not important enough? Logan! Gilbert laughed as he drank back his brandy in a single gulp. You're a rotter. What's happened to you since we last met? Logan sighed again, lowering his head as he admitted defeat. Very well. If you must know, I think I may be besotted. Besotted? Gilbert asked, head tilted in question. As in, a pretty female? Very funny, Logan replied, rolling his eyes. You know full well what I mean. Well, it could have been a horse, but you are quite right, and I apologise. I'm assuming this new lady friend of yours is someone very special to you. She is, Logan replied with a blank smile. He stared off into the distance, picturing Olivia, and a gentle smile grew on his face. She is beautiful and witty and intelligent. I'm entirely enchanted by her. Then, why are you so quiet and thoughtful over it? Surely this is a good thing. Logan sighed, blinking as he pulled himself from a daydream and returned his focus to Gilbert. It is a good thing, but what if... He trailed off, unsure how to express himself. What if it rains? What if it pours? Gilbert sang out. He got up from his chair and wandered over to the drinks cabinet, returning to his seat with the brandy decanter in hand. There's always a what if, my friend. That doesn't stop us going outside, does it? Logan snorted. If the clouds were black, then I would avoid going outside, he pointed out. And are the clouds black? Logan shifted uneasily in his seat. Gilbert always had a way of making him see things from a different angle. No, the clouds were not black at all. If anything, they were golden. But that wasn't to say they would never turn black. All right, Gilbert stepped in. Let's start again. Where did you meet her? Logan felt a flush of embarrassment at the realization that Gilbert had met Olivia at exactly the same time that he had. It felt like such a personal revelation, as though he had seen something Gilbert had not. At your house, actually, he admitted. My house? Gilbert frowned in confusion, but only for a moment. Soon his expression changed, and his voice rang out with laughter. Ah, I spotted the modiste through the door. I thought I saw you giving her the eye. I was not giving her the eye, Logan complained. My mistake, Gilbert said with a chuckle. Have you seen her since? I happened upon her when I went to see the travelling players last week. Any good? Gilbert asked. Logan smiled to himself. Oh yes, she looks simply beautiful, and we went for a walk. She really is a fascinating creature." "I meant the play," Gilbert said, snorting with laughter. "Did you manage to watch any of it, or were your eyes otherwise occupied?" Logan laughed. "Very well, I admit it. I don't recall much of the play, but Miss Olivia, my goodness." "Do you want my opinion?" Gilbert asked. "Of course I do." "Then here it is. Logan, I have not seen you smile like this in such a long time. You obviously like the girl. So, what exactly is the problem?" Logan fell silent for a long moment. He didn't know if he'd ever get over the guilt of past disappointments, and wasn't entirely sure that anyone else could possibly understand. "Eleanor," he said eventually, his voice cracking at the sound of her name. "Ah, yes," Gilbert said. He looked down to his lap, straightening his trousers to hide his discomfort. "I should have guessed, but she is gone now, Logan. You must allow yourself to live your life." "But how?" Logan cried. "How is that possible after everything that happened?" "When our carriage veered off that path and Eleanor died, I lost everything." Logan let his memories drift to the day his wife had died. They had been so young and full of life, excited about their future and all it would bring with it. Logan would finally have the family he had yearned for, but a freak accident had ended it all, suddenly and brutally. "Have you considered trying to get in contact with—" "I don't want to talk about him," Logan replied, cutting Gilbert off before he could finish his sentence. He knew what his friend was going to say, but he could not bear to hear it, to hear that name. It saddened him too much. But nothing, Gilbert. I do not even want to think about him." "Very well," Gilbert replied, his tone slow and careful. Logan caught his breath, taking in a gulp of air to stay his emotions. Whenever he thought of the past, all his vulnerabilities came to the fore, and meeting Olivia, having even a glimmer of hope at love again, pulled the past from where it belonged. When he spoke next, it was soft and barely audible, his eyes fixated on the wooden floor in front of him. "What if it happens again?" "What if it does?" Gilbert asked. He ducked his head, attempting to catch Logan's eye, but Logan refused to look at him. "Are you willing to lose the good for fear of the bad?" his friend asked. "Honestly, I don't know," Logan replied, finally meeting Gilbert's gaze. Gilbert opened his mouth to speak, but words would not form on his lips. He was unsure how to phrase what he wanted to say. "Logan, I know I have said this often enough, but now it is more imperative than ever. The past belongs in the past. You need to let it go and move on. And even though my beautiful Lydia and I have no children yet, and you—" "Stop right there. How do I live on with all that has befallen?" "Miss Olivia," Gilbert replied, now seized with enthusiasm. "You have such a glint in your heart over her, Logan. Use that to help you heal. Do you think it possible?" "From what little you've said, she sounds wonderful. Just what you need." Logan smiled shyly. "She is," he admitted. "I can't really explain it, but I feel an overwhelming connection to her. We hardly know one another, and already I'm terrified I'm going to lose her too." Gilbert reached over and patted his friend's arm. "Love is difficult, even when it's wonderful," he said. "Love!" Logan cried in surprise. Gilbert chuckled. "Yes, Logan. Love. I do believe you are in the midst of falling in love again." "I don't know about—" Logan's words were interrupted by a knocking at the door. "Come in." The butler entered, silent on his feet, and bowed politely. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Your Grace, but you have a visitor, one Lord Beckingsdale. Are you available to speak with him?" The name made Logan's blood run cold, and he froze. Of all the people he wanted to see the least, Lord Beckingsdale was one of them. "Your Grace?" the butler repeated, snapping Logan to attention. "Yes, sorry, Beaumont. Yes, I'll see him right away."
Scan the QR code or click on the link in the description to read the full book. The full audiobook will be available on YouTube in a few days. What did you like the most? Comment below and share this video on your social media and with your friends. Watch one of the following videos. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to not miss any new audiobooks. Thank you for watching.